All right. Well, hello again, everyone, and I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Strategies for Focusing Your Career Search. I'm Calvin Landrum, a training coordinator with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating a live Q&A at the end of the session. Also joining us are Jessica Knight and Indy Clark from our partners at Education Northwest, who have helped prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A from time to time. They'll be answering questions and helping you out there. So I'd like to jump right in and welcome our guest speaker today, Victoria Crispo from Idealist Careers. Now, throughout Victoria's 16-plus years in career, throughout her 16-plus year career in resume writing, career coaching, higher education, and working with nonprofit job seekers, she's used a nurturing and practical approach that is driven to achievement. As manager of college and professional outreach at Idealist, she contributes to its online publication, Idealist Careers. Through the written word and also via in-person workshops and webinars, she brings relevant tips to today's social impact job seekers and career changers with sensitivity towards the challenges they face. Understanding the roles that a positive outlook and holistic self-care play in career success. She encourages job seekers with time-honored methods for improving confidence and productivity, and we are so happy to have her. Hello, welcome, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Calvin. I'm really excited to be here today.
Of course, we're so excited to have you. This is a great, great opportunity. I'm really excited that you could be with us today.
Likewise.
So this is the first in a series of webinars focused on your career development. You, the Vista, we're really concerned with your career development. So we thought that it would make sense to start our series off with a webinar about focusing your career search and figuring out, where you'd like to place your energy in the first place. Here's what we hope you'll get out of this webinar. We'd like for you to be able to self-evaluate what your priorities and values are in order to know what's important to you in a future career. We want you to be able to create a personal mission statement to further clarify where you want to head professionally, and also build and track your targeted employer list compiled from resources mentioned during this presentation. So that's kind of our thing. So I think we have a pretty good agenda and session goals here. Again, we want to say thanks to Victoria for being here with us today. So Victoria, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at Idealist Careers?
Sure. So I'm currently the manager of college and professional outreach for Idealist as a whole. And in that role, I provide support to job seekers by leading webinars and presentations just like this one with a focus on finding, landing, and loving your social impact job. Prior to this role, I was the audience development and content manager for Idealist Careers, which again is our online career publication. And I've been also writing our career advice column, which is called Ask Victoria, and I encourage any of you who have a specific question about a challenge that you might be having, whether in the job search process itself or perhaps something having to do with how you want to advance your career, finding an internship, or making sense of some volunteer opportunities and seeing how it might relate to a future career. Happy to respond to any of those. And a little bit more about my own career. I've been working in the field of career development for several years, having started at a private liberal arts college in New York City over 16 years ago. So I've worked with many job seekers like you who are looking to explore opportunities in the nonprofit sector or launch their social impact careers after graduation or a professional experience like Vista.
So hopefully, with that being said, hopefully everyone can see why we asked you to join us today, all this relevant experience that you have. So a lot of our members are looking into the nonprofit sector after their Vista service. Are there any differences between applying for jobs in the nonprofit sector versus maybe the private sector?
Well, first I would say that having Vista experience is actually a great entry point into the world of nonprofit work. You're becoming accustomed to the lingo and the language that is used at nonprofits. And keep in mind that just as every corporation has its own personality and culture, so do nonprofits. So you'll find that some are quite serious-minded and formal, and others that take a more playful approach to their work. And knowing what works best for you is really important when you are looking for work. So it's it's more about finding that type of fit than what differences might exist in the mechanics of job search, whether you are looking for a for-profit or a nonprofit job.
Oh, great. So I think we, yeah, no, totally. I think I agree with you. So there's many aspects of the job search I know, that are going to be the same regardless of sector. And I know that you still need a resume and other application documents for those things. So can you give us maybe some key points that maybe you'll want to keep on your resume?
Oh, sure, definitely. So you'll want to have your resume focus on certain areas that are definitely of importance to nonprofits. So any work that you've done in a volunteer capacity that relates to your particular cause area. So whether that be education or some form of social justice or animal rights, whatever it might be, you'll want to showcase that you have experience, involvement, and just an overall background in any of those given areas on your resume. So volunteer work is a great place to do that. In addition to that, you would really serve yourself very well by showcasing that you have a couple of skills or characteristics that individuals and nonprofits might be really interested in. So things like being able to wear many different hats and be resourceful in your in how you use your skills, and also the resources or lack thereof in any given nonprofit where you might work. So why are these things important? Well, being able to wear many different hats means that you can easily transition between different departments at any given nonprofit, and this actually helps to safeguard you as well. Let's say you're in a role that you love, but after a few years you feel that maybe you've outgrown it, but you still love the organization where you're working. Perhaps there is a great fit for your skills elsewhere in that organization, whether it's in a different department or if it's a smaller organization, maybe a 4-person shop. It might mean that a discussion with your manager about how you have advanced so far and what skills you want to really increase and develop going forward might mean that you can create your own new position at that organization. So it's definitely great to be able to show that you have that you have flexibility, and of course many of the other things that, again, regardless of sector, it doesn't quite matter what sector it is, but anyone who wants to hire you wants to see that you have time management skills, oral and written communication skills, etc. So those are a couple of the aspects that are going to really help you in the application process. Also, I have heard from several hiring managers at nonprofits that sometimes they really like to see some type of fundraising experience, even if the job that you're going to be doing doesn't necessarily focus on that job function, but just the fact that you can do it can be really helpful for nonprofits. And aside from just being able to do it, to be able to raise money, the other reason why it's so great is because it really shows that you are able to really get to know the group of people that are most important to that organization. So obviously the populations that they serve, but also their constituents. So who are the people who are attracted to give their time, money, and energy to this organization? What are they all about? And when you can have a great handle on that, you're going to be able to do your job so much better.
Totally. Yeah, and I do want to go back to the resourcefulness part. I think I read a quote from you once that said, if you can keep it all together with a paperclip and some gum, then you're a prime candidate, and I just really liked that quote from you. So touching back on what you said, I think it's really great, and it's great to know, that our Vistas bring so many translatable skills and experiences no matter what field they bring. Like you said, fundraising, volunteer work, that resourcefulness, these are all really good things that hiring managers are looking for. So So I want to ask you next where job seekers should begin their career search process. But before you answer, I want to check in with our viewers to see what they think. So on the right side of your screen, you're going to see a poll question that you need to answer. Many of you have experienced the career process. So we just want to know, where do you think you should start? You can take a second to answer that poll on the right. So where should you start the career search process? Should you research organizations first, assess your skills and interests, maybe revise your resume, read job listings, network, or maybe it's an other? So I've got some ideas of like what I think it should be. I think maybe it's a little bit of a trick question, but not really. Let's see. And then once you guys are all done, those will tabulate, and then we'll be able to see what you all said. I did see in the chat we had a couple people while we're waiting for that to calculate. Victoria says she just ended her leader term, looking for a job that interests her and pays reasonably well. Always been the kind of person to accept anything, but this time around I'm just trying to really sell myself and aim high-ish. Hope it'll pay off. I hope that pays off for you too. Good luck with the career search. Hopefully you can get some tips from our webinar today that'll help you out. We've already discussed that you have a lot of good skills that you've gained as a Vista, so you're off to a good start there. All right, so our poll has finished calculating. Let's see, what do we got? 181 of you said that you should assess your skills and interests. That is that's good. I mean, I think that is a good place to start. We got a few people that said research organizations. Some of you said revise your resume, read job listings. Reading job listings, I think, is a really, that's a very logical place to start also. I would agree with you. All right, cool. So it's good to know that where you guys stand. So Victoria, so where do we start? I think this is an interesting question, sort of maybe without a straightforward answer. Victoria, can you share your perspective on the career search process?
Sure, absolutely. So this is really exciting for me to see the poll results, and I love that there's a focus on assessing skills and interests. I definitely think that that is an important part. My approach actually is that the way I see it is the job search is a process, but not necessarily a linear one. So in fact, if you had started in any of these areas, it would be okay. I don't think that there's any right or wrong answer. That being said, I do think that assessing your skills and interests is a fantastic place to start, but you don't necessarily have to. I think that the main thing that is very important is how all of these things work together and understanding that you can do any of these activities at any point in your job search and that you're not necessarily ever done with them, that many times you might have to switch back and forth from some of these different job search activities. So whether it's assessing your skills, building your network, you're never quite done with any of those. And again, this is regardless of the sector that you're interested in. There's really no right or wrong way to start the process. It definitely makes sense to have an elementary understanding of the key differences that you're going to encounter when applying for nonprofit jobs. But remember that even as you assess your skills right now, you're not necessarily done. This is something that you might need to go back to revisit several times, not just throughout your career, but through any given job search. And as you learn about new activities, opportunities, that would be the reading job listings part, you might come to realize that you actually do have the skills and experience required to do that work. And likewise, you're never done with networking. This is something that should be an ongoing part of your professional and personal life. I'll be back later on to make some more sense of all of this, but for right now, I want to pass things over to Calvin, who's going to guide us through an exercise that will help identify where our priorities lie and serve as a jumping point for the job hunt. Calvin?
Yeah, thanks. So when searching for direction in your career search, simply saying, I want to work in nonprofits or I care about public health is a lot of times, that's just not enough. Approaching the big, diverse job market means understanding what draws you to the work. Now, Idealist has a great resource that you should check out. It's the Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers for First-Time Job Seekers. Now, this is full of tips and resources for finding employment, but don't let the title fool you. Even if you're looking for employment in the for-profit sector, and this is not your first time seeking employment, this guide still has a lot of great tips to help you be more strategic about your career search. And we're going to drop a link to this guide into the chat so you all have it. There it is. I see it right there. Thank you, Jessica Knight. So we'd like to really take the time to explore one reflection activity from the guide called the 4-Lens Framework. Now, what it says is that there are 4 lenses to think about when trying to assess where you are currently and where you'd like to go in the future. Just knowing one of these lenses is a great start and a really big step in the right direction. But if you can hone in on what you want in all 4 categories, that's where the magic happens, So let's take a look at each lens and really start to build the foundations of our job search. So the first lens to think about is the issues and interests lens. So if you're entering the search for a career through the lens of issues, values, or interests, what we're talking about is identifying the broad area that you want to work in. Now, to help identify where our interests and values lie, you can ask yourself, what issues do I care about? Which types of news stories really catch my attention? What would you do if money was no object? Or what do you wish you could fix in the world? What types of activities do you find yourself doing in your free time? And just remember that sleep doesn't count. I know we'd all love to get paid for taking naps. If anyone figures that out, please let me know. But sleep doesn't count. Now, this is probably the most common lens that we think about and probably the easiest to identify because no one knows better than you what you like to do and what you care about. Jeffrey in the chat says, what are you willing to struggle for? I really like that. I think that's an excellent question and an excellent reflection question to ask yourself when thinking about your issues and interests. So these issues or interests, they can be causes or issues that are important to the public or just important to you personally. They can be things that you're simply interested in and would love to do. For example, maybe you're starting your search knowing that you want to work in education, the environment, healthcare, or maybe you're passionate about anti-racism issues, maybe about reproductive rights, fashion, or even food. So what are some of your guys' interests? You can go ahead and place those in the chat. I'm sure we'd all love to see sort of what are your interests and issue areas that you care about. Share them in the comment box. What do we got? Climate change, cooking, refugees, migrants, woo! Lots of good nonprofit things here. I like this. Equal access, theater and the arts. I think I might have seen mechanics, which is super cool. Education, sustainability, women's rights, gerrymandering. Man, keep it going. This is really great to see. So the next lens that we want to look at is organizations. And you can keep it going in the chat if you want to while I'm talking. So organizations. This asks you to think about your career search from the perspective of what organization do you want to work for? Ask yourself, who are my favorite organizations or companies? They consider what it is about these places that appeals to you and which ones are you particularly drawn to. Maybe who does similar work? What organizations or company would you take the time to read a full news article about? What products or services do you regularly use and stand by? Now, we can all probably easily name a dream employer, but it can be a bit daunting applying for positions at your top pick of organization or company. Maybe there's a job that you're barely qualified for. Maybe there's no position that you're qualified for. Maybe it's just like sort of a long shot. If you know that you're interested in working with a larger, more well-known organization that maybe you're a little intimidated by at first, take, for instance, maybe the Gates Foundation. I know I have lots of friends who would love to work for the Gates Foundation. Maybe try researching small organizations that they fund, that they contract out to, or that they collaborate with, and explore those smaller organizations first. They can be really great gateways and pathways into kind of leading you in that direction and even sort of a door into where you want to go. So again, in the chat, tell us some of your dream employers. Where would you like to work? Where do you see yourself in the future? What organization do you guys want to be at? An FPI, Greenpeace, NASA. Fun fact: my office here in DC is right next door to NASA, so we see those guys a lot. Universities, Reebok Women, Sweet, United Way. DMV, NASA, Park Service, Girl Scouts. I like the Girl Scouts. So this is where I'm at now. That is good. I like that. Then you've got one big old checkbox marked off already. All right, moving on. Let's go to the third lens, which is going to be roles. So the third sort of career lens to think about is the specific roles or positions that interest you. When thinking about your career from this lens, ask yourself, what types of tasks do I enjoy doing? What type of role would I like to take on, and what do I currently have the skills, education, and experience to do? And do I have the skills, education, and experience needed to do that? What else does this role require? If you're an extreme introvert, a position in customer service is almost guaranteed to bring you unhappiness. So really think and assess, like, okay, what do I actually enjoy doing? And try to, I just love the phrase, just kind of stay in your lane a little bit, and do what feels good and do what feels right to you. There's a lot to consider in this lens because many companies have similar job titles, but they can mean wildly different things in terms of actual job function. So try to get specific. Maybe you want to be a producer. But what does that really mean? What kind of producer do you want to be? There's all types of producing jobs. You could work in TV, radio, news, or really any industry or company that distributes and creates content. One of the overarching goals of this entire exercise really is to narrow down where you'd like to do the position and what it is about that type of role that you're drawn to. So do you guys know what kind of position or role you're looking to fill? Is this something that you thought of? Maybe it's sort of look at some of this project manager, develop any job for dungeon mastering or game making. Okay, sweet. I like game making. That's fun. Programs manager, communications associate, marketing outreach, recruiting coordinator, grant writing consultant, head chef. Oh, head chef. I like a cook. I like to cook. I like someone to be a head chef. That's good. Logistics, teaching, development associate. What's interesting is that I'm reading all of this, a slush reader, submissions editor. That's pretty cool. I like that too. You must love, love, love to read. What's cool too about this is that I see a lot of postings on Idealist that have these kind of titles, so you guys should go check that out. If you don't know what kind of role you want to fill, if you're looking through this list, anything's popping out, or if you're just like, oh, I don't know what to type, that's okay, because you may need to try out a few things before you find what works for you. And if you're like me, I've always my entire life, I've always wanted to have my hand in everything. So it's really always been very hard for me to kind of answer this question specifically without listing, 5 or 6 different things that change depending on who's asking me. I'm always kind of up in the air, and I never know what I want to do. And I've, had to try a lot of things before I found what I really enjoy doing. Yeah, so keep those coming. Someone says, yeah, same here. You feel me, Jeanette. It's really hard. I want to do it all, and you just can't sometimes. All right, so our fourth lens, our fourth and final lens is going to be systems. Now, when looking at systems, what we're talking about is the kind of organizational system, what kind of organizational system do you want to be a part of? Do you like the risk, uncertainty, and excitement that comes with working at a startup, or would you prefer the stability, influence, and immediate recognition that comes with a more established company? Do you want to work in small communities where the work is more personal or intimate? Or would you like your work to be far-reaching, influencing things nationally or even internationally? You should you should also think about approaches to work when considering where you would like to work. Are you into doing direct service? Are you into working directly with a client? Do you want to be behind the scenes? Or would you like to be an external face of a company? Does the company work philanthropically? Do they have, charitable undertones? Is that something that they're really passionate about or really involved with? Included in systems are also populations or communities that you want to serve. So if you're looking to work in the nonprofit sector, there's a good chance that the organization that you work for serves a particular community or fills a specific need. It could be an organization that works with families affected by prison sentencing laws or a crisis hotline for LGBT youth. If you're working for a large corporation, it could be that they serve, the entire nation, like everyone is your customer. Or if you're at a small or local business, they could serve a state, a city, a town, a very small community. Maybe the question when thinking about, systems is, where do I want to live? It can be that simple. There's a lot to think about here, but we want to show you just how detailed and specific you can get before you ever search for a single job. It's worth it to take the time to reflect on your experiences and get clear on what your priorities are. All right, so after contemplating the 4 lenses and their related questions, the goal here is to, would not be mad if I lived somewhere outside of the United States at this moment. Come on, Zamara. You're happy on this webinar with us right now? After contemplating the 4 lenses and their related questions, your goal is to formulate a statement for yourself reflecting your priorities in your career search. Now, this is very aspirational, but this will be a lot more focused than simply saying, I want to work in nonprofits. Breaking your answers out into statements will help build that mission statement that we were referring to earlier. So you can say, I'm passionate about whatever my issue is. I want to work somewhere like blank organization or an organization that embraces this. I'd like to take on the responsibilities of your role. I want to serve or work with whatever the community or population is. So you can see that. So let's take a look at how this kind of looks and plays out. Let's take a look at the example on the slide and try to identify, what this person's lenses are. They've identified what their issues and interest area are, and that's learning and education. Those are broad issue areas, but if we continue reading, we start to see this person get more and more specific and start to pinpoint exactly where they would like to be. Now, there's no specific organizations named, but we can see that they'd like to work in a well-established agency because part of their systems lens is that they like the stature and security of a more robust organization. Sorry. As far as roles, they've identified that they like the train-the-trainer model and want to work with teachers as a trainer, curriculum developer, or a program manager. So it says, I like this description. You see how we can pull all 4 of the lenses together to create a really good mission statement. So let's take a look at one more example at how this might play out. So we have a person here with different career aspirations in the previous example. So we can see they're interested in finding a career in radio or broadcast journalism. That's going to be their interest area. The organizations that they want to work for, radio stations or local news outlets. If we read this, we can see, that they say, this is a large field that requires some specialized training, but they believe that they can sell themselves for an entry-level position, radio station or local news outlet. So they want to work with a company that aligns with their politics and personal beliefs, so a place that's more liberal-leaning and alternative is what they're going for. So that would be, that would play into their systems. Like these are the things that I care about. These are the kind of things that I want to do. What sort of roles do they want? They're saying, producer, writer, sound engineer. And again, their systems. What populations is it? They want to stay in Texas. So Texas metro areas. So as you can see, this is so focused. This personal statement can be used to guide your search and really help you narrow down where you want to land. When using job sites like Idealist, USA Jobs, or Monster, you now have criteria that you can use in the in that like advanced search feature. If you type executive assistant into a job search engine, it'll yield hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. But searching for an executive assistant position in the state of Michigan at a company with fewer than 500 employees that focuses on media is really going to help you weed through all those postings that really are of no interest to you. And I think it's so now you can see sort of how this becomes applicable if you can just take the time out to self-reflect, and think about those lenses and how they apply to you. So now I want to bring Victoria back to start talking about tips for researching potential employers. So thanks for waiting so patiently while we went through the 4 lenses. Being clear on your priorities will help you be able to identify organizations and positions that align with your goals and values. Victoria can share with us some tips and tools to help with researching potential employers. So is there an advantage to searching for potential employers versus searching for potential jobs?
Yes, I would definitely say so. It gives you an opportunity to identify where you're interested in working based on your values. So organizational culture, the history and mission of an organization, its community, and its impact are often critical to the happiness of any full-time change maker. And knowing key features of the organizations where you will thrive can make it easier to tailor your job search and networking efforts. So think about it. Instead of having this broad net where, I'll take anything at any type of organization, it really helps tailor your job search and hone in on particular areas that are really going to be a great fit for you. And remember that the job vacancies at any given organization will always be different, but the mission and the culture will most likely stay the same. And your values are also likely to stay the same. So while your goals and needs may change over time, it's likely that an organization you were interested in working at 5 years ago, you'll still be interested in working at today. So this is a document that we use all the time when we're presenting to job seekers, and it is called the Targeted Employer List Worksheet. And I see a whole bunch of people popping up as they're opening the document as well. So this is in view-only format for now, but it is accessible to you. You just need to if you go to File and make a copy, select that, make your own copy, and that will be fully editable for you. But just going through a couple of the different sections of this and how you can use it. So the first section is about the organization. So obviously you want to have the name of your organization and its cause area, a little bit about their mission, any services or products that they offer, and any latest news and initiatives. So why is that important? Well, if an organization that you're interested in is developing a new program or perhaps has been in the news for some great new development, these are the types of things that you really want to be able to have top of mind, whether it's because, hey, in 2 weeks from now, I'm ready to apply for a position, or perhaps you have an informational interview with someone who works there, and so on and so forth. So this is a great place to put that type of information, and it can really be helpful in both assessing the organization as a place of, do I want to work here, and also helping you in your job search or perhaps preparing for the interview, et cetera. Next, there's a section called About Me, and that section will outline why you're interested in that organization, the type of position that you might desire, and also what you can bring to this organization. Now remember, just as the job search process is not a linear one, you may not have all of these sections in the spreadsheet filled out in any type of chronological order. It might take some time before you have a good response to this question of what you can bring to the organization. But as you gather information, that might become more clear to you. And again, really great thing to look back to should you get to the interview stage at this organization. And it's an easy way to be able to answer that question of, what are your strengths? What can you bring to our organization if you already have a potential answer right in a spreadsheet for you. We did add a section for contact information. So if you know someone who works at the organization, you can use this section for that. So obviously the person's name and title, when and how you met, their contact information. And if you already have some type of system where you keep track of your networking activities, feel free to continue using that. But we did want to include this section should you want to keep all of your employer and organizational information together in one place. Moving along also about your contact, there's a section for information that you can list about your relationship. So the most recent time that you contacted that person, the status. So for example, if you are waiting for a date for an informational interview, or perhaps you're waiting to hear back from them about whether there's even a job vacancy at the moment, a section for next date of follow-up. So for example, if you do have an informational interview, when are you going to send out your thank you note? When are you going to contact that person next, just to follow up with any progress? And then of course, any notes or next steps that you have. So that's pretty much how you can use this spreadsheet. Again, the networking piece is to help you foster your relationships with networking contacts. And I have also an example of how I use the spreadsheet. So I'm going to divert to the homepage of an organization called HipTipico, and I will just give a little scroll down so that you can see what they are all about. This is a video that comes first, but this is a sustainable brand based in Guatemala. As you can see, they have some give back initiatives, backpacks that give back to education, etc. You can visit them in Guatemala. They're working with local artisans, etc. So how did I hear about this organization? I was actually in contact with a potential contributing writer for Idealist Careers, and she was the one who actually mentioned this organization to me. She was in contact with the founder of the organization because she was in Guatemala doing an internship. They happened to connect, and she mentioned the organization to me, and I just thought it sounded really interesting. And excuse my lack of mouse control at this moment. But here's how I use the spreadsheet. You know what, I think I'm going to just drop the Zoom. Can you still see this at 125?
Yeah, I can still see it.
Perfect. Okay, so here's how I use the spreadsheet. I put the name of the organization, its cause area and mission, what services or products offered. Again, this is an instance where I was never quite done with the spreadsheet because I did not include any latest news and initiatives, but I already see some new and different things that are happening right on their website. I see that they created a promotional video. The backpacks program, I believe, is different. So definitely new things going on, and that's where I would put that information. I included why I am interested in this organization, a potential type of position that I might be a good fit for, what I think I can bring to this organization. I included my contact person's name and title, how we met. She wrote a guest article for Idealist Careers, her contact information, and then again, finishing up with most recent contact date, the status. So right now she's actually on hiatus, so I will be reaching out to her in a few months. So this would be my next step. And that's pretty much how you would be using that spreadsheet.
Sweet. I think we saw a lot of comments in the chat. People are really into it, and they really like it. There was a lot of people that were sort of requesting that. I just want everyone to know we can go ahead and put a copy of it along with all the resources from this presentation. When this is posted on the Vista campus, you'll have a link to it so that everyone can use it if they'd like to.
Great. So continuing on, here are just a couple of ideas of how you can even find organizations that interest you. So you might want to think about organizations where friends and family work, museums or event venues that you like. I noticed several individuals who were mentioning that they were interested in theater and the arts. So definitely take a look at those. Which ones interest you? Where might you see that you would be interested in working at? Don't underestimate where you volunteer. Might there be a place for you for a paid position as well? Places that you've applied to in the past, and that could be for a job or an internship, or perhaps even a former full-time role. Organizations where your friends and family work, And another one that I love to point out is where you donate your money. And that can, of course, vary geographically, and it could be dependent on how willing you are to make a geographic move. But definitely consider the point that if you are willing to donate your money there, you might want to support the organization with your talents as well. So again, this is just the start. There are many, many ways to discover organizations. You might even find interesting ones as you're reading or catching up on current events. I know that's a way that I have developed a long list of organizations that I was interested in just getting some more information about. I used to have a subscription when I was in career development at a college. I had a subscription to Crain's New York Business. And of course, you don't need to use that one. You can use any resource that you like, but I would have a pen and a piece of paper at my side while I was looking through it and would write down any organizations that sounded of interest to me. And of course, another good place to start is just by looking within your own network. So after today's webinar, take some time to work on your targeted employer list, and remember that this is a work in progress. And at any time, you can do a search on Idealist to see if the organizations on your list are currently hiring. Calvin, I think you have another question from the audience.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I've got one for the audience. So we want to know how the audience has found organizations that align with their interests in the past. Put in your ideas in the chat box, and make sure that you send it to all participants so that we can all see it. If you're on a mobile device, remember that you'll find the chat feature at the bottom of the participant panel. So Lindsay Beth says that she actually uses Idealist all the time, so look at that.
Great.
We've got some LinkedIn, the alumni LinkedIn group, getconnectederie.org. That sounds probably local to Erie, Pennsylvania, which I think is great. People often forget to look on like local job boards.
Definitely a good place to try.
Let's see, good food jobs. I've been on there before. I dream of being a farmer sometimes. It's one of those many hats that I'd love to wear. The Rome Group, I don't know what the Rome Group is. I'm not familiar with that. Let's see. Victoria, have you heard of the Rome Group? Do you know what that is?
No. Rome like R-O-A-M or Rome like the city?
R-O-M-E, like the city.
Okay. I'll have to take a look at that one.
I know. I don't know that one. I'll write that down. Oh, the Rome Group is for St. Louis. Gotcha. That's what someone said. Outreach coordinators usually have good knowledge of other organizations, good to network, and express your interest if you're comfortable to. Totally. Goodwill Job Connections, Parent Org of Museums, Association for Professional Design, Vault. There's so many good resources in here, so many good suggestions. Thanks, guys, for putting those in the chat. Please keep it going so everyone can kind of keep getting these wonderful ideas. Make sure that you're taking notes if you need to. You can also copy and paste from the chat. That's another way to take some notes on here. I know it can go kind of fast. So I'm going to pass things back over to you again, Victoria, who's going to talk to us about another one of the facets of starting your career search, and that's informational interviews. I saw someone that had a question about that in the chat, so maybe that'll be answered.
Great. So yes, definitely. Another great way to learn about an organization or a field or even a specific position is to set up informational interviews. And if you're unsure whether you're well suited to a job, basically you just want to find people who do that type of work and set up a time when you can speak to them for what's called an informational interview. Remember that this person may or may not become influential in helping you to actually get the job, but you want to build that relationship for the sake of gathering information and learning about the work. So here are some questions that you might want to ask. What educational requirements are there for their particular position? How did they come into this type of work? What did they do prior to this role? What advice would they have for others who want to do similar work? And you might also want to ask what their day-to-day work looks like, what their primary responsibilities are, and what they most value in their position. Similarly, you can ask what they find most challenging or least rewarding about the work. And remember that you might get an even more forthright answer from them as opposed to asking, say, an interviewer in an actual interview for a job who is an employee for an organization. So with an informational interview, especially if it's a closer contact, someone who you know fairly well, but perhaps you don't really know much about their job, they might be a bit more forthright with you about what some of those challenges are in their workplace. Also, be sure to ask the person that you are doing the informational interview with what you should be reading, or if there are networks with which you should be connecting to learn more and to meet others in the field. And lastly, you might consider asking them about the future of their profession. So, for example, what will future jobs in their field look like, and who would be best suited to fill them?
Nice. Let's see. I think we got a couple more tips for them.
Absolutely. So basically, don't ask for a job. Your goal is to gather information. It's not this part is not about searching for the job itself and asking for a job, but rather for information that will help inform your job search. So it's really about building a network, and it's also part of doing your research. It's also typically not a good idea to contact the person listed on a current job posting and ask them for an informational interview, at least as long as the job post is still live. They may interpret that request as an attempt to land that job in particular, rather than a general interest in the work. Of course, do be prepared. So take a list of questions with you and have a way to drive the conversation forward if it falters. So you want to make sure that you have a really great list of questions and some ones that your interviewer can go in depth in. So make sure you have a couple of those in your back pocket. And it will also help you ensure that you get answers to your most compelling questions. Next, be gracious and thank them for their time. And also, if you can, pick up the tab for coffee if it's an in-person interview. Definitely follow up. Again, send them a quick thank you note for their time. And this also begins the process of staying in touch, as you can potentially foster this relationship over the lifetime of your career.
Yeah, totally. I think those are all excellent tips. We've got some other people in the chat. You know, someone said, call 10 people and say, hey, do you know anyone that works in this field? That's a good way to kind of reach out and sort of kind of feel out, you know, the network and start building those contacts.
Definitely.
So we all know that informational interviews are a really important part of building a network, but they're really only one piece of the puzzle. If anyone on here would like to go more in depth about building a network, we've got an entire webinar coming up in March dedicated to this topic. We told you guys this is part of our career series. So coming up in March, you should consider registering for building a professional network for service and career. It's coming up on March 23rd. We've got a link to that in the chat if you're interested and if you would like to check that out. So another part of the job search process is reading job listings. As you remember, this is one of those 5 things that we identified at the beginning. When searching for a job, it's critical that you understand what exactly that job entails and, honestly, what's being asked of you. This will not only help you on your resume, but will also help in understanding if it's even worth it to apply in the first place. So, Victoria, you know, how can you use job listings to help in your career research, and what sort of things should you be looking for?
Sure. It will help you develop an understanding of the skills and experience necessary to do the job. There's no guarantee that a social marketing manager, for example, will be doing the same exact type of work at every nonprofit. But reading through the listings will start to give you a handle on the skills that are generally most important for the role. Reading through the entire listing will also inform you of the type of organization it is. So pay attention to the words and language used. Ask yourself how the organization is describing itself, and does it fit with the impression that both you and also the general public has about it. So how do you personally view the organization, and is the way that it describes itself similar to that? And does the organization describe something that you truly want to be a part of?
Cool. So I think we have a question that I think leads really well into our next slide, which is deciding to apply. Someone said, hey, should I apply, you know, if I don't even have, if I'm missing, you know, one of the requirements, you know. So it's important to review job listings so that you stay informed about the requirements and responsibilities of a certain field. Position descriptions can help you learn about the skills, certifications, and experiences that you might want to work on so that you can one day be ready to apply. They can help you stay informed about what's required or important to a specific job or field. And it also kind of helps you find the language to use in your resume. I know that when I've been looking at job postings, I'll see some sort of application that I've never heard of. It's like, oh, should be proficient in this very specific fundraising application. I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but it really helps you do a little research so that oh, I should probably know this because this is something that's widely used in the field that I want to go in. So, Victoria, do you think that you should be looking at job positions even when you're not ready to apply?
Definitely. I would say it's important to review job listings for the purpose of staying informed about the requirements and responsibilities of any given field. So looking at those position descriptions can really help you learn about the skills, certifications that you might need, and the experiences that you might want to get involved in so that you will one day be ready for that type of role. And by reading through job descriptions, they can help you stay informed about what's required or important to a specific job or field. It helps you find the language to use for your resume, and it helps you discover jobs and roles that you may not have heard of before. So these aspects make a difference when you're technically not ready to apply because it helps inform your choices when you are ready. And you might discover clues that will become important when the time comes to apply, and also even for an interview. For example, if you see that the organization lists deadline dates that are over a month away, it can indicate that they won't be very speedy about the whole process.
Right, and I do see some people in the chat saying, they're sort of answering this question, but I want to ask you, should you pursue a job when you meet most, but not all of the skills and qualifications? Is there some gray area? And what if it's your dream job?
Yes, definitely apply anyway, because basically the general rule of thumb is if you meet 80% of the requirements with 20%, that remaining 20% not necessarily being absolutely essential for the job, you're in pretty good shape. The list of requirements tends to be more of a wish list for the hiring manager. So if you don't meet each and every one, it's typically okay. But if there are some that you don't meet that really seem to be absolutely essential for the job, you might want to give pause for those types of applications before you get yourself really deep in the weeds of figuring out the best way to apply and making sure that you have, all of your most relatable skills on your resume. But like, for example, if the position requires that you are bilingual and you don't know the other language, that could be a problem where it's a requirement that you don't meet, but it's absolutely necessary for the job. So it might not be the best use of your time or the hiring manager's time if you apply for that position. But there are many, many others that it makes perfect sense to apply, even if you don't meet all of those requirements. In fact, sometimes when you do have a different perspective from your other experience, that can be just as powerful as meeting every single requirement to the letter. And there are many employers who will consider that, and I think you'll find that more in the nonprofit sector as well, that they're willing to take a different perspective on someone's experience and see how it might work at their organization.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, like, while we're talking about skills and qualifications, I think we can talk for a second also about tailoring your resume.
Great, definitely. So the other aspect of your job search would be, of course, tailoring your resume. And when you already have a resume written, you might want to take a look at it, and it can help inform you of what you might want to do next or how your skills relate to a particular job. But remember that until you have a clear vision of the type of role you want to pursue, it's likely that whatever you currently have on your resume will change, and perhaps it will change drastically. Remember that you don't have to focus solely on your prior work experience. Your hobbies, volunteer experiences can also help inform your job search and tell you a lot about your abilities, strengths, and interests. If you need help in updating your resume or thinking about what you're good at, or just really need some good time in reflective thought over what you've been experiencing most recently and how it could relate to the type of work that you want to do. One way that I suggest tackling this is by simply writing lists. So lists of the types of things you do well, the things that you're interested in, and any areas of intersection that you see. And once you do that self-reflection, you can open it wider. So ask family, friends, even former or current coworkers, or perhaps classmates. So some questions that you can ask them. What are things that I do well? What do I really seem to love to do? And what are projects that you've enjoyed working on with me? And of course, it's very important to tailor your resume to the position or field that you're applying to. And I understand that there are some upcoming webinars that will focus on this. Calvin, can you share some more?
There are some upcoming webinars that focus on this. So we have a webinar coming up on March 9th, focused on applying for federal jobs using your non-competitive eligibility. I've seen a lot of questions in there, and I know there are some questions queued up that we'll be getting to in a moment. And we also have another webinar on April 13th focused exclusively on translating your VISTA service to your resume. You don't want to miss these if you're looking for help with your resume and trying to figure out how to best represent your VISTA service. You'll see a link in the chat to a previous recording that we did of the applying for federal jobs using your NCE, but we're going to be doing it again, presenting it live, so if there's any questions, you're able to ask them there. So we are almost to the Q&A section of this presentation, but first we want to recap some things that you can do to help focus your career search. We kind of want to run through this again. So one, take a second to reflect on your priorities and create that personal mission statement. Using that 4-lens activity that we ran through, research and start your targeted employer list. Read those job listings and keep track of key terms and maybe skills needed, things that you need to learn in order to get the job that you want. Set up some informational interviews, have you a good set of lists, have a good set of questions ready, and again, revise your resume and do that constantly. Something that has really helped me in life is to just keep a running tab of everything that I've ever done. I have one big, giant, gross document where I dump everything on there. There's so many bullets, and anytime I do anything, I add it to there so that when it comes time to apply for a job or apply for opportunities, I have a big, giant list of things that I can pull from and kind of tailor-make a resume every single time. It's very easy instead of having to kind of come up with something each time. So we also want to review some of the resources that we mentioned in today's presentation. All these links are available on the VISTA campus, or they will be available on the VISTA campus. I know that there's a lot going on right here. You can leave this up for a second so that you can take a screenshot if you need to, or just kind of write some of these keywords down. But again, we will have these on the VISTA campus. So if you miss it, that's okay. It'll be there, and you'll be able to get these back. Yeah, so we've got the Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers. That has that 4-lens activity that we went through, idealistcareers.org. With Victoria, she has her Ask Victoria column, which I'm so jealous of. I wish I had a column. Maybe I should start one for Vistas. There's the Target Employer List worksheet, which you can also find there, idealist.org for job postings. Our webinars page, we have webinars on doing NCE, on using your non-competitive eligibility, building professional networks, translating your VISTA service. We have the VISTA Campus Job Board, which is an excellent resource for jobs because the people that post there are already familiar with VISTA and they know what you guys do. So that's kind of one hurdle out of the way. We've also got the Employers of National Service and our AmeriCorps VISTA LinkedIn page. So check out all of that stuff. Again, those links will be posted on the VISTA campus. So we've given you a lot to think about, and we want to get to your questions. But before we do, we want to ask that you take a second to give us an evaluation. Our evaluation popped up on the side over there. We really, really, really care about what you have to say about these. We use all of your responses to tailor these for you all and to make sure that and make sure that we're giving you the content that you need and that you want. So if you wouldn't mind, take a second to just kind of fill out our evaluation, let us know how we did, give us some feedback, because we read every single comment that you guys give us. All right, so we, again, giving you a lot to think about. We're getting into our Q&A section with myself and Victoria. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box so that we can queue them up. We've got about 10 questions already queued up, so that may be all that we can get to, but go ahead and put them in there, and we'll see how many we can take. Now, I think Kathy, our operator, is going to tell us how to ask questions via phone.
All right, thank you. To ask a question on the phone, please press the *1 and please record your name. To withdraw your question, press *2. But once again, press *1 and record your name on the phone. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we'll check back in on the phone in just a second just to see who's there. So, Victoria, are you ready for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
All right. So let's see. I can take this first one, and I know it's sort of been answered. We do have a webinar all about it. But again, the question is, how do you explain VISTA to an employer that has never heard of it? Again, we have an entire webinar just about this, translating your VISTA service to your resume and career, and we're also presenting it again. But I think, in short, you know, if you remember doing that elevator speech, you know, during PSO, where you kind of said what your organization was, what VISTA is, and what we were doing, and trying to sum that up in about 60 seconds, that should give you a pretty good idea. And I bet some people in the chat, I bet if we ask our audience, I bet we can get some good responses. You know, how would you explain VISTA to someone who'd never heard of it, and maybe a sentence or two? I always say, you know, when people ask me where I work, I say, you know, I work for one of the largest poverty organizations in the U.S. You know, we place volunteers all over the U.S. who work on poverty issues and capacity building. Our volunteers fundraise, they manage volunteers, they build capacity at organizations so that they can continue doing the work that they're already doing. It's sort of a little wordy and kind of specific to my job, but that's kind of how I say it. Someone says, I start by saying, I'm doing a year of service, and then explaining their role in their organization. I like that, having job experience, something different than school. Oh, I think that's a comment on something else. But yeah, so go back and check out that webinar, and then we'll keep looking in the chat to see if anyone can give us some ideas on how to explain that. All right, let's see. I think, Victoria, I think this could be a good question for you. So it's a two-part question. The first part of this question is, let's see, which is kind of a hard question to answer. Are there particular challenges for older VISTAs and the job search? And that's a hard one to answer for me because I am not an older VISTA. So I feel like I should be asking you that question, Michael, who asked it. What are the challenges that you found as an older VISTA in the job search? I'm not sure, Victoria, if you have any, maybe not VISTA specific, but just challenges for older job seekers.
Yes. So I do interact with several job seekers who have definitely expressed some concern as to what to do when you're managing a job search and you may feel like you're being met with instances of ageism. And I am certainly no expert in this field, but there are definitely some strategies that you can use, and it's absolutely about making sure that you seem up to date and that you are ready to work in a job that utilizes all of the technology that we currently have, and that you are really up to speed on any new developments in whatever your career area is. I think this definitely comes into play with individuals who, in addition to perhaps being an older job seeker, they have also been out of the workforce for whether that's several years or several months, and for a variety of different reasons. Perhaps you are taking care of a child, an elder family member, or perhaps even have your own medical issues that you needed to attend to, and that caused you to take a break from your professional experience. And in any of those, I think that definitely being able to showcase that you have had some type of involvement where you can. So again, if you've done any volunteer work, or perhaps even in whatever time you might be able to on the side, if you've had some type of pro bono projects, or maybe you worked with some friends who were looking to start their own businesses or start a nonprofit, or even if you were just doing some training or taking on an online class, or something that you've done so that you can have something else on your resume and showcase that you're current.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it kind of goes back to what we said about reading job position descriptions, and saying, oh, do I know what this application is? What are they asking me to do? Do I have these skills and experience? Or am I familiar with these systems? And then kind of educating yourself on that and learning more about it, maybe taking a class on that system, like you said, to stay relevant and stay current with the current demands and asks of whatever field you're in. Let's see, the other part to that question was, I'm also very much an introvert. How does networking work for introverts? I know that can be a little tricky if you are more introverted and, don't really, and maybe have a hard time, being very, very social. Something that I know friends have told me that's really helpful for them is, being fully prepared really helps them network and really helps them come out of their shell. If you're able to go into a situation with questions already prepared, knowing what you're going to say, and not feeling like you're going to have to be on your toes the whole time, I know that really puts a lot of people at ease. So I think as an introvert, just being fully prepared and going in and saying, okay, I've got command of the situation. I know exactly what's going to happen. I know, more or less how I'm going to handle my interactions with folks. I think that can go a long way, in sort of your quest for networking. And remember, there is the entire online world that you can network, so you kind of never even have to be face-to-face with a lot of people, if that kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies a little bit.
Sure. I absolutely agree with your suggestions, Calvin. And also one thing that I usually like to recommend is that you don't have to network at events that are called networking events. In fact, I might suggest that you take the word networking out of the equation and just look at it as building relationships, or maybe the term connecting with people works better for you. What I would suggest is perhaps finding some meetup groups that exist for whatever topics or activities you might be interested in. So if it's a dog walkers group or a science fiction readers group, really find something that is really in line with your interests, because when you're at an event that is about a topic that you feel passionately about, it's a lot easier to talk about it and just play around with it and see how those conversations go. And typically, just like you would perhaps if you're an introvert, you won't do this, but sometimes you might be at, say, the grocery store, or in a really long line to buy movie tickets or whatever it might be. And there are those instances where you just start talking to people, and sometimes, where do you work, or what do you do, or where do you volunteer? These are the types of things that come out in natural conversation. So putting yourself in situations that for a fact you're going to be comfortable in, start there and take the I need to find a job part out of the equation and just really get to know the person for the sake of getting to know them. Another tip that may help is imagine that the other person is feeling like you as well. So you may not want to approach the person who is loudly speaking in a room with lots of hand gestures and already has 3 people who they're almost giving a presentation to, but find someone else who might seem like they have a personality that is a little like yours, and see if you might be able to actually be the more extroverted person, as introverted as you might be, and that might help a little bit as well.
No, totally, I agree. I think those are excellent tips. Let's see, another question that we have that I think is a little tricky, that Victoria, maybe you might have some tips on how to think about it. How do you prepare online applications, or how do you make yourself stand out when an application is online? That's really hard because pretty much all applications are online these days.
Right. So I noticed that that question come up in the chat box, and definitely it is not a question that I can answer without any excess of other information. I think that there's no special way that you are going to stand out in general with online applications. It's really a matter of looking at each application individually and honing in on what is most essential for this type of job, what type of person do they want to work here, and does that sound like me? And the closer you can get to those things is what is going to make your application stand out, far more than any magical phrase or special terms that you can use.
No, totally. I agree with you. I think it's really just like looking at that PD and saying, do I sound like that person? like is that me?
Right.
You know, I think that's like.
Does that sound like me? Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, those informational interviews and everything else that you do, use those opportunities to find out what are the things that will stand out to hiring managers for those types of organizations, for those types of roles.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we have another question here from Nathaniel Hafer. He says, when's the earliest Vistas can or should start applying for federal career positions to qualify for the federal non-competitive status at the end of his or her service? So Nathaniel, Vistas, I typically say start applying for things about 2 to 3 months before the end of your service, because especially if you're applying for a federal position, hiring just takes a really long time. It takes about 2 to 3 months sometimes. You're able to let them know that you will have your non-competitive eligibility and that you just don't yet because you're a Vista and you haven't earned it, because most hiring managers know that, you know, they just know that, like, they know how long the process takes, and if you're able to explain in your cover letter or in some other section on your application that, yes, I'm currently serving as a Vista, I will have this non-competitive eligibility, you know, they're cool with that and they'll work with it. So my suggestion is about 2 to 3 months before the end of your service. Don't leave your service early, but I'd say 2 to 3 months before the end of your service. Let's see, that was the same question there. Oh, sorry, did we have any questions on the phone? I should check in.
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, cool. He just said you can't get the non-competitive until after. That is what I said. All right, so let's see. We've got, Morgan asked, how do you keep in touch with someone who you've already had an informational interview with? Like, what's the best method, do you think?
Oh, sure. Well, definitely start with that thank you note. And if you can, I would also add, in addition to your genuine appreciation and thanks, but put something in there that is very much a reminder of what you discussed, something that you discussed, some type of conversation piece, I guess you could say, that you can use as a theme to continue going back to as you continue to follow up with this person. So, you know, think about like the highlights of your conversation and add something about that, and perhaps even something that, whether it's an article that you read or something else that can keep the conversation going. So, so definitely find elements that are like that, and then perhaps there was something that the person that you interviewed mentioned to you as a good resource, and maybe, you know, a couple of weeks later you looked into it and you can follow up with that person about how beneficial that was to you. You can ask for additional information or ideas. You can follow up on perhaps projects that they mentioned in your informational interview that you are genuinely curious about. But those are just some of the ways that I would say you can follow up and continue that relationship and that conversation.
Yeah, excellent ideas. Let's see. Oh, Brian, I see you in the chat. I saw your question. I'm not going to get too political on here, but I will say, just in response to that, AmeriCorps, Vista, and CNCF as a whole is under no threat of anything. To keep the course, keep doing the work that you're doing, because that's what I'm going to be doing over here. We do really good stuff, so we're good to go. For right now, you have all the same information that we do, so if you hear anything, let us know, and if we hear anything, we'll let you know. All right, Lars says, how would a personal mission statement translate to an objective on a resume? I think that's a really good question, and I think, again, like sort of Lars, using that 4-lens framework, if you can identify those 4 parts, pull them out, and kind of turn that into 1 or 2 good sentences, I think that will really help you start to see how that looks like an objective, where it's like, I'm interested in a position doing yada 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 because because my interests are this. I'm seeking. I want to work for a company that has this and this. I think if you can just whittle it down, take out any excess language, whittle it down to your kind of core values, core statements, core objectives, I think that'll really help you start to translate that mission statement into an objective on a resume. All right, let's see. Scott Keith says, let's say I get a job offer in month 10 or 11 of service, and that's too good to pass up. Basically, how do I make the switch without burning bridges? And if I need to leave sooner, how do I approach that without taking people off, pulling the rug out from underneath them? Scott, I will say that don't leave your service early is always my advice, because there could be some forfeiture benefits there. That's just sort of like the legal, that's like the law, and there's not a lot we can do about that one. Everyone who works at Vista understands that after Vista's over, you're going to go on and do something else. So we're always willing to work with you on when you should leave and get you out the door, and hopefully your employer would do the same. I can say that I've rarely heard of a situation where if someone's at the point of offering you a job that they wouldn't wait for you once you say, yes, I want to do this, but I have this previous commitment that I have to fulfill, because if not, I'm going to lose. Like, people understand situations, especially if they're at the point of giving you a job offer and they can wait a month. In my experience, that's typically been it. I don't know, Victoria, do you have anything on that?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that again?
Yeah, certainly. So we're saying, if you get a job offer maybe a month or 2 before the end of your service, that's too good to pass up. How do you make that switch without burning bridges? And my advice is just, don't end your Vista service early. Make sure that everyone's on the same page, and make sure that you're being very open and transparent about, I have to finish this on this date. I will be done, and I can come over to you. And I said, if you're at the point of having a job offer, they're more likely to work with you.
I think it's better overall. I think it also is, you would hope that whoever your new employer is going to be, it's going to look better in their eyes as well, that you want to honor your commitment. So if you have a month left of your Vista term, I would say, finish it out, and if there's some way that you can work with the new employer to say, I need to do this, but perhaps I can, put in some hours in the next couple of weeks to kind of front load my my training a little bit, so that I'm not taking, it's not going to take an extra full month before I actually start. See if there might be some leeway where you can sacrifice some personal time and continue with the service that you need to, the service hours that you need to complete, and then also if there's something that you can do with the other employer to kind of get yourself in that fold for the time being, and then of course get onto your full-time work when you're finished.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's see. We got another question. Marcia says, when do you take relevant undergraduate experience off of your resume? I think that's a good question, and that's something I know I've struggled with. Is like, you know, at what point do you start leaving things off of your resume?
Sure. I think it really depends on a variety of different things. So I'll talk somewhat generally, but I might need to get some specifics in there. So let's start with perhaps you have things from your undergraduate experience that are actually about coursework that you've done, maybe some field work that you completed or a major research paper or project. Those things, I mean, and there's no specific timeline, but I would assume that after you've been out in the workforce for 2 years working a full-time steady job, I would think that the time to remove those would have come and gone. So I would say definitely you can start taking things related to your coursework off within those first 2 years of having a full-time job. Other things, perhaps part-time jobs. Another good rule of thumb is any instances where you're repeating the same type of work. So for example, if 4 years ago you worked as an administrative assistant part-time and now you have, and then 2 years later you had another administrative assistant role where you did a lot of that work and then some, it might make sense now that, say, you're 7 years down the line, taking that first administrative assistant position off because you're not really saying anything new that you're not also doing in that more recent position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really. I think also, like, you know, if there is something on your undergraduate that is relevant, I mean, why not put it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can definitely leave things on if they're relevant, especially if you have made a couple of different transitions already. So if your experience from your academic career is actually more relevant to what you're doing right now, this moment, it might make sense to put that on. So yes, fortunately or unfortunately, every instance is a little bit different, but I think that, you know, just having a couple of tentative timelines of when you could start to take things off as you really build a portfolio of relevant experience.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, and I think that is an excellent note to end on. We are at our time, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. There are still a few in the queue, but if you have any questions after this, you can definitely find AmeriCorps Vista on LinkedIn. You can find myself on LinkedIn. You can always find Idealist Careers on Twitter, and we can keep this conversation going. You guys can totally reach out to us anytime you'd like. Again, thanks for attending, and we hope that you can join us for our next webinar. Thank you so much, Victoria, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I do want to mention, I did notice one private chat that there's been so much chatter that now I lost it, so I do apologize. And if there is anyone else who did chat me privately that I did not get to, please do feel free to reach out after this presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Totally. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so check out our next webinar, which is Creating High-Impact Images for Better Outreach. That's going to be on February 28th. You can check out the webinars page under Connect and Learn on the Vista campus. And we hope to see you guys soon. Thanks so much.